Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the GitLab 11 release retrospective. The first item for the previous retrospective improvement tasks is mine. So on 10.8, we noticed that a really large number of merge requests was being merged really close to the feature freeze date, causing RCs to have a huge amount of commits. These RCs normally were buggy, and it was really hard for release managers to find what was the original problem because it contained so many commits. So to deal with that, Felipa and I decided to track all merge requests for 11 that were merged between the 5th and the 7th to understand what kind of merge requests are being merged like in the last moment. And the data is really quite interesting. We noticed that 30% of the merge requests were merged on those days for CE, 26% of the merge requests were merged on those dates for EE. And surprisingly, there were all types of merge requests, not just regressions and bugs, deliverables also. And for 11, we had like a lot of front end and bootstrap merge requests as well. And well, we had a lot of more interesting data on the issue. Please jump in and check it out and leave comments. And with that, I'm going to pass this to Robert.
Thank you, Myra. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the stuff we're doing to kind of ease our entire release process through automation. The first thing that we shipped this month was we can now tag a release via chat ops. Myra actually had the honor of doing the first one for RC9. It actually had a bug that we discovered, but we fixed that, and then all of the subsequent tagging seemed to work pretty well, so I'm really happy with that. This is a minor thing. It wasn't a major speed issue. It wasn't a major bottleneck for our release process, but it did actually shave a few minutes off of each tagging. So we'll take whatever we can get. We also automated the release manager permissions, so it's easier for onboarding and offboarding release managers. And there's a link there of the rough roadmap of where we're headed. The next thing is going to be releasing packages through ChatOps and deploying. And we're heading towards automated deploys to staging to speed that whole process up. Stan, EE to CE downgrade test.
Cool. Yeah, the chat-up stuff is useful, especially when you're in a different country that doesn't have reliable internet. So I think it'll pay off in places like when we were in Crete. So last month we had a feature that we ported from EE to CE, and then that caught a lot of different weird edge cases because the migrations have to be just right. So we've added a new test that basically will test the previous EE version and upgrade to CE, the next CE version. So potentially they'll catch some of these problems in the future. So if you see a QA failure relating to that, then you'll know why that's there. So on to Felipa or Myra, the release.
Hi, it's me. So there were a few good points this release. The first RC to be deployed to production was RC5, and it was deployed on the 7. We made 8 deploys to production with 11.0 version, and I linked to a comment in the issue where you can see literally everything that happened from tagging to staging and canary and production deploys, and why weren't some of the RCs ready to production. We deployed 11.0 to production on the 21st, so one day before, and we tagged 11.01 as a critical security release on the 22nd, that was Friday, and we released it on the 25th on next Monday. And I'm taking over James because he couldn't attend, but we tagged more RCs than ever before. We tagged 14 RCs for this release. Myra, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Felipa. So another great thing that happened for the release was the exception request. They were definitely more thoughtful. We had 13 in total, 9 were approved, 3 were not approved, and 1 is pending. So that was really great, and it was quite a change. And back to Felipa.
We also made an addition to documentation on exception requests because there were a lot of questions on what to expect in this exception request, and we hope that is more clear to everyone. And well, Robert also already commented this, but a great improvement was the shut-ups command. And basically, for you to understand what this means is, before we had this command that would tag the release in Slack, we would have to run the command locally in our machine. We would have to wait a few minutes and pray that we wouldn't lose connection or anything else. And we then had to manually announce it on a couple of channels in Slack. And with this change, everything is automatic. We just run the command. We don't need to do anything else, which is great. Myra, over to you again.
Thanks again. So the communication with the GCP team was really good. We managed to do the release work around that. So thank you for that, for being really open with us. And also the trainees did a really good job. Both were really enthusiastic and eager to help. And I am passing this to Victor now.
Sorry, I just wanted to mention on the discussion side, we shipped 3 really big features. Assigning list and board, roadmap view, presets, and expanded weights. These are all pretty big features from a perspective of like customer impact and user impact. So even though some of these might have been easier or smaller scope from a development and testing perspective, nonetheless, they were pretty big from a customer facing perspective. So it's rare, I would say, that at least on the discussion side where we can nail 1 big feature, and we had 3. So I think that was a great thing for the discussion side. Tim?
Yeah, just wanted to mention that the Web IDE made another big jump on the feature side with CI jobs and CI statuses. So we brought in another big area of GitLab into the whole Web IDE universe, and looking forward already to the next stuff. Now, what went wrong this month? Over to you, Philippa.
Thanks. So there were also a few things that were less good in the release. So the first one was the Bootstrap 4 update had a big impact on the release. It was a very stressful first week. So this update was, for the ones that don't know, was merged into master with some known bugs. There was some miscommunication. The release manager were not informed that the UX team was okay with some of the regressions. The regressions for the release managers were very hard to track. There wasn't a regression label, and the weight was being used to reflect the priority, and it was upside down, and this was very hard for us to understand if we had to wait longer, if we need to move faster. This delayed the first 5 RCs. And in total, there were more than 200 regressions. We had to pick more than 150 merge requests, which means a lot of time picking, a lot of time running builds, a lot of time deploying to only go back to the first point. I'm not sure if Clement or Tim, do you want to add something into this? I can read it. So basically, Tim says that what is the suggestion in such a framework update? Should we couple all of the bugs in one merge request and merge them again? So my answer to that is the best thing would have been to merge into master with known bugs. We could have worked in a branch from master. We would keep upstream up to date daily and deploy that branch to an environment where it would be possible to test, and only merge that branch over to master again. Maybe you would have taken a bit more development time, like a week or 2, but it would have been a lot less stressful on the release team, and it would also probably the fix that we're seeing are causing other bugs. So the rush into fixing 200 regressions is breaking a lot of stuff that wasn't broken before. I forgot to write that down, but I will. Tim, there's a new point that says see comments below. I'm not sure if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I want to add the comments below in the what will be better to summarize that stuff. So let's go on with the RC5. Okay, so RC5 deploy to production also went wrong. So when we started the deploy, we lost access to git pull and git push. We originally thought it was because we didn't deploy to Canary before, but it wasn't related, and everything is on the infrastructure issue if you want to check it out. We also lost another trainee this release, and Maya, over to you.
Yes, thank you. So another thing that went kind of wrong was the security release was rescheduled 1 week before, and it was the same week as the final release. So that increased the work for the release managers and trainees. And basically last week we had like a lot of fun in the release team. And well, I am passing this to Meg.
Awesome, thanks, Mara. So something that went wrong this release is the amount of merge requests in the release overwhelmed the QA task. So just for reference, it's 6 times the amount we saw in 10.8. In 11.0, we have 650 plus, and in 10.8, it was just 110-ish. So initially, we used the git log command, which has proven that it will no longer scale with us. We actually got 2,300 commits just for RC1 alone. So we then fall back to use the work in progress QA automated generation task that we were working on, and that toned it down to 393 items. But still, this will not scale. So we are reverting back to a one QA RC task for one release going forward. And we're also adding a feature assurance task that's going to be overarching all the RC QA tasks going forward. And the product managers will be working inside this FA task instead. The release documentation update is there. The task template is also there. Further improvements that we did. So we have now fully automated the creation of the RC QA task and with better readability. So this is based on the merge request information with tags and labels and not just the commits. This is fully done. The sample content is there, documentation is there. And we also looking to link this to the chat ops in the release process. So everything is done in one. In addition, we're also tracking forensics on what's needed, the missing setup on staging that people need to perform validation tasks. So we're actively gathering information there. On to you, Tommy, for Sean.
Thanks, Mac. And yeah, I'm standing in for Sean here for this item. He wanted to remind everybody to please make sure to keep our tooling and documentation about migrations up to date. This is one good way that we can improve. So far, we've been leaning a lot on the database team, who is awesome, but not very large compared to the rest of the engineering organizations. So in the agenda here, we have a link to a merge request. It's an example case if you want to review that. But the main takeaway is if you see something that we could improve with our migrations, or if you see something that's out of date, please open an issue. And Sean especially calls out Stan and the release managers for flagging that particular example. With that, I will pass it on to Tim for Bootstrap 4.
Well, sorry to interrupt, Tommy. Before we move on, if we could make this, we're looking for action items and champions coming out of this release. If we could make this one very actionable and put it on a specific person or group of people, is there a way to do that? Like, could this be the release manager's responsibility to create these issues? Or is it truly something that needs to be spread across the whole organization and therefore harder to sort of track and affect change?
I think that's a good question. It's one that I don't have an answer for right now, but we can work on it.
Okay. I think that for this particular issue, it was addressed, but I think Sean was just reminding people that we need to make sure so maybe the action item here is to create the documentation about just keeping things up to date.
Well, maybe, so what I'm suggesting is maybe there's something where we put it on the release managers to, go around to the various engineering managers and ask them, like, pull the information. Do you need to update your documentation and make sure that it sort of happens? As opposed to just sort of a general call to action. Does that seem like it would be the right place to sort of put this responsibility in terms of like requiring that someone ask this question at a certain cadence?
Right now, we actually already have a task just as part of every merge request that we do. Did you update the documentation? So I think we already asked this on a regular basis. I think this particular one just snuck through and Sean wanted to draw attention to that.
Okay. That's fair. All right, then Tim, Bootstrap 4.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me despite the rain outside. So what have we learned from the Bootstrap upgrade? So first of all, what we needed the upgrade for was that we want to bring in reusable components in the next 2 release cycles. So for that library that we are using, we need Bootstrap 4 and also to bring our CSS up to par and basically clean it out. What have we learned? Overall, we needed to touch over 700 different routes and all the CSS classes changed and a lot of elements changed, even HTML setup changed. So there was simply a lot of changes. We should definitely get to having easier review setup and make it clear to everyone. As we had a joint testing team with UX, we should have had a full instance that is running that branch and for quite some time and really make it that each part of the application is tested by someone else. Especially as we had the blocking issues, by example, on the terms of and condition page. So that was something that was not tested because it was not set up on the administration, or that at the end of the GitHub import, we had like white font on white background. So this is also something I think we should get at some point, if we need such big overall changes to all the Humble pages. Currently, we don't foresee it, unfortunately. We should have full test handbooks, or really have documentation like checklists. Okay, those are the major use cases, at least, that we have, not test by test. The big thing that we are actually pushing for will also help us in this regard. So the UI component library will have visual regression testing per component and per use case. So in the future, we should be able to see such changes directly on the visual regression test and really have tests, because currently all those changes were untested, as we simply don't have visual regression tests over the whole application. And the other big thing is really that at the moment we have in the CSS style sheets a lot of very specific legacy CSS that is really targeted at specific pages. So there is some CSS that is pushing the button in 5 pixels in that direction, then another CSS that comes in, pushes it 5 pixels to the other direction, etc. And as soon as you now update those changes, they either get lost, and this is, by example, then moving the button to a different point. So we definitely need to reduce that, and that is really the target of our UI component library as soon as we have that in. And there we can really add it additively to the whole application and not have a full change over the whole application again. Yeah, those are the learnings that we have brought down to the point. As I'm the last one, I'm handing over to Eric to point out things to improve for next time.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. So yeah, this is an interesting retrospective. I mean, there's a lot that went well. There's a lot of good improvements here. I'm not actually seeing very specific things that we normally choose for champions and action items here. I mean, Mech made some suggestions about the QA task. It looks like those have already been implemented. You know, Bootstrap 4 is something we did. We want to make sure we do that better next time that comes around, but obviously this doesn't happen quite often. We had Sean's suggestion about, you know, a reminder, but there isn't, you know, one or a set of glaring things, which is sort of good news. I guess I would just, you know, ask a catch-all question. Is there anyone that would want to nominate something, particularly the release managers? Is there anything that we've missed and would say, well, we need this person to do this specific thing before the next release to tangibly improve things? Or are we satisfied saying, like, this was overall, you know, a pretty good release? It obviously required a lot of effort, particularly on the release managers, but you know, the results were definitely good. So Felipe, Myra, last chance. Anything you would really want to see happen before you know, rotate off?
Yes, I have 2 suggestions. The first one is to use the data we tracked for the merge requests that were merged between the 5th and the 7th. We didn't really understand how we could turn that into action items. It's not worth to know that the biggest percentage of our merge requests are merged between the 5th and the 7th if we don't do anything with that data.
We are, Robert and Maren are investigating switching to weekly releases. It's more of a Q3 initiative and OKRs as opposed to a civic action item, but I think that would help with this. If we can decompose the feature freeze, we would have less of this big moment. Unless there's something else you're talking about, like if there's something specific we can put on managers or specific people to avoid this, you know, spread out the work, smooth out the curve. I'm not sure what we can do here other than just generally ask people to, you know, try to avoid the feature freeze if possible.
Yeah, I don't think that's on the release. The problem is on the release cycle, but in the development process.
Well, the two.
I don't have an objective suggestion though. So.
I think another thing that we can improve is the use of the peaking to 11 label, because for this release and for the past release, Felipe and I had to review every merge request to see if they are actually a regression of if it is actually a bug, so we can pick it or not, and that was extremely time consuming for us.
And so who would do what to make progress against that? Is there is it a process or is it a specific tool or?
It is more like in the developer to actually use the pick into 11 label, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So yeah, so again, like definitely things we can be better at. Everybody should take a look at Philippa and Myra's data and try to get things in, at any time in the release. Obviously, it doesn't have to be the 5th and the 7th. There's understandable reasons of why that happens because we are on a cadence, but try to flow and work smoothly over the month. And then developers, try to use that picking tool or the label to make that easier in their release managers to avoid manual work. But again, I'm not quite seeing that that's sort of like the one big deliverables that we would put on a champion. So I guess this release will be the first one, I think, since I've started going back to, geez, I think it was 9.6 or something that we haven't had that, but that's if that's true, then that's good news. It means we're incrementally.
I'd like to suggest one thing because I mean, if we look at the two big things that happened this release, the Bootstrap 4. That's the framework that we can talk about that. But if we just ignore that one and talk about that RC5 deploy that Philippa pointed out in the option, and the reason that happened is we were running GitLab.com without all the post-deploy migrations finished. So I'm wondering if we need to champion, hey, let's run GitLab without all these migrations finished and make sure it functions, right? So I can imagine a QA scenario where we run everything except for the post-deploy migrations, run all the QA, make sure it works, and then run the post deploy and make sure things continue to work. So I could see that as being like a one action item out of this, because I think that was a big, we forget because that was so long ago, but I think that was the first RC really that we deployed that kind of blew up on us. So,
well, I mean, ideally we'd like to do that on a per MR basis rather than on a release candidate basis, because I don't know that scales, but we can certainly do that in the short term. Mac, do you want to maybe comment of, is that possible? Is there enough time to do that? And what would the benefits be?
So we could configure a dedicated job that runs against staging and tests on the staging environment. But would that help, Stan? Can we test against staging?
Well, staging might not be in that kind of situation, right? So a lot of the times we test staging when things are done, things are in the happy place. But I'm talking about, we run in a lot of situations, we run GitLab.com without having finished the post-deploy migrations, and then we run these batch of migrations, and so it's in a kind of different state that we haven't necessarily tested against. And
so if we had GitLab QA running against production in the middle of deploy before migration,
yeah, help? But then it's already too late then, right? You've already blown up there anyway.
So the specific issue with RC5, just so I understand, are we saying that we deployed it, everything worked, then we ran the migration, and then we lost git pull and push?
Well, we've gotten in a state where we ran the first set of migrations. We were in a state where we hadn't finished all these secondary migrations. So we lost git push and pull during that time until we finished the post deploy, and then everything started working again. So it's like this black hole that we never usually test against, because dev never runs into this state. Staging is usually done by then. It's just a big blind spot right now.
Yeah, so Stan, if the QA test, so we have an upgrade test and the QA test. If the QA test had an upgrade test that followed the same migration procedure,
exactly,
ran the initial set of migrations without the post migrations, then ran tests, then did the post migration and ran tests. That's kind of what you're looking for.
Exactly, and I don't think it's a lot of work, so that's why I'm suggesting. I think it's a GitLab QA thing that we can easily create.
Mike, is that clear? Does that feel?
Yeah, I think let's just create an action item in the GitLab QA project, and then I'll work on assigning somebody to work on it then.
Okay, all right, thanks. So I'll give that to you, and then if you want to delegate it, just let us know and update this doc. Well, thanks, Stan. That's exactly the sort of thing we were looking for. Apologies, it took a little while to get there, but yeah, it looks like we do have a highly leveraged task that we can put on one person to deliver for us. So thanks for that. So unless there's anything else, I think that's it for this retrospective. But great job, everybody, particularly Philippa and Myra, and particularly on the exception requests. I really appreciated how you all handled those. Thanks. Have a good day, everybody.